On June 26, 2020, Mexico City's police chief rode an armored convoy along Paseo de la Reforma, a major thoroughfare inside Mexico City, when gunmen armed with high-caliber weapons and grenade launchers launched a coordinated ambush. The attack resulted in the deaths of 2 of his bodyguards and a nearby civilian, while the police chief himself sustained multiple gunshot wounds. This brazen assault, occurring in one of Mexico's most secure urban areas, sent shockwaves throughout the nation and underscored the escalating security problem. However, this attack was different. The police chief himself attributed this attack to the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG, a criminal organization that has rapidly expanded its influence and is known for violent tactics and strong military-like organization and discipline. CJNG's capability to orchestrate such a high-profile attack inside of the nation's capital highlights its operational reach and the challenges faced by Mexican authorities in combating organized crime, specifically against cartels just like CJNG. We're going to do a deep analysis in this video of CJNG, from its history and organization to the current situation, using the PMESII-PT framework. This is something that we've been doing in past videos. As always, I'm going to front-load the physical dimension for its context, and it just gives a lot of context for the rest of this analysis. I'll also be splintering the time element throughout this analysis. We have a lot to discuss, so we're just going to dive right in. The physical environment plays a crucial role in the operational strategy and resilience of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. CJNG's rapid expansion and persistent operational strength can largely be attributed to its deliberate exploitation of Mexico's challenging geographic features. CJNG primarily operates within regions characterized by rugged mountains, dense forests, and remote jungle terrain. Such areas are inherently difficult for Mexican authorities to access, patrol, and secure with law enforcement or military. Notably, the cartel has established strongholds throughout the Sierra Madre Occidental mountain range, particularly in states of Jalisco, Michoacan, and Colima. These mountains offer natural fortifications from Mexican authorities, obscuring illicit activities from aerial surveillance and ground patrols. Obviously, the cartel uses this terrain as a natural defensive advantage. Rugged highlands of the Sierra de Jalisco and Michoacan are particularly significant, providing cover for clandestine laboratories, drug cultivation areas, and fortified camps. Reports indicate that CJNG maintains numerous hidden camps in multiple parts of Mexico, used for everything from training to production of narcotics and even the storage of weapons. These sites are often heavily fortified and very well hidden, featuring makeshift barriers, watchtowers, sophisticated surveillance measures to detect incoming approaches. CJNG also strategically uses Mexico's extensive coastline, particularly its Pacific coast. It has become very proficient in maritime smuggling, employing everything from small boats to semi-submersible narco-submarines, modified fishing vessels to transport cocaine and other kinds of synthetic drugs northward towards the United States, as well as to international markets further abroad. The Pacific coast's complex network of secluded coves, sparsely monitored waters, and challenging maritime weather conditions all provide ample opportunities for evading law enforcement. Multiple reports from investigative journalists, law enforcement, and the Mexican military confirm the existence of fortified ranches and hidden training camps deep within the Sierra Madre Occidental, and these sites are often accessible only through narrow, winding roads or even just on foot, not even on vehicle, and this significantly hinders efforts by authorities to reach out and dismantle them. In recent years, Mexican naval operations have intercepted CJNG-operated narco-submersibles, especially along the Pacific coast, and this really implies that the cartel is adapting to the maritime environment and they are implementing new kinds of technology to move product northward. Overall, by exploiting Mexico's natural landscape, CJNG not only secures its illicit operations, but also ensures a durable defense against persistent attempts by authorities to weaken its infrastructure and capabilities. And that is exactly why this domain is so darn important. CJNG's rapid ascent has shaped Mexico's criminal landscape and significantly impacted its political structures. By exploiting state corruption, establishing parallel governance systems, and capitalizing on weak rule of law, CJNG exerts substantial political influence across multiple Mexican states. CJNG emerged in approximately 2009 to 2011 from the remnants of the Millennial Cartel, initially an ally of the powerful Sinaloa cartel. Following internal division actions and confrontations with other groups, like, for example, the Los Zetas, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho, consolidated control, officially establishing the cartel as an independent entity around 2011. Some key dates to be aware of in terms of CJNG's history. In 2011, of course, as we just discussed, is whenever the cartel was formed. And when it announced its existence, it formally declared war against the Los Zetas. In 2015, CJNG shot down a Mexican military helicopter during an operation that was attempting to capture El Mencho. And then in 2020, CJNG launches an assassination attempt on Mexico City's police chief. And this brought unprecedented attention to CJNG's capabilities. Politically, CJNG operates under a hierarchical yet decentralized leadership structure, led by Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, or nicknamed El Mencho. He is considered one of the most wanted criminals internationally, with a $10 million bounty offered by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency, or DEA. He is the supreme leader and primary decision maker of this cartel. Other key figures that you need to know about within this cartel: Rosalina Gonzalez Valencia is the wife of El Mencho and is the key financial operative. She's responsible for money laundering and the logistical network operation. Ruben Alsegura Gonzalez, nicknamed El Menchito, is the son of El Mencho, previously the second in command for this cartel until his arrest and extradition to the United States back in 2020. Eric Valencia Salazar, nicknamed L85, is a former founding member and key operator. He was involved in internal conflicts, and that led to him forming a splinter group. L85 formed Cartel Nueva Plaza as a rival group to CJNG alongside Carlos Enrique Sanchez Martinez, named El Cholo. El Cholo was yet another CJNG lieutenant. El Cholo was tortured to death by CJNG in 2021, and L85 would later be captured by the Mexican military in Jalisco. Corruption remains a key element to CJNG's government strategy. The cartel systematically infiltrates and co-ops local and state governments, most prominently in Jalisco, Michoacan, and Veracruz, and Colima. Using financial resources from drug trafficking and extortion, CJNG funds political campaigns, bribes officials, and infiltrates local institutions to maintain operational security and avoid prosecution. Municipal elections allow cartel-aligned candidates to assume power. CJNG effectively operates as a parallel state in territories under its control. It provides security services, resolves local disputes, and imposes strict cartel-enforced rules. This shadow governance model grants CJNG legitimacy among some communities, especially in those neglected and further remote by the central Mexican state. This is something that we discussed back in our big Mexico analysis video, so here we're seeing a real-life example of that actually happening. The cartel's authority is often enforced quite violently, establishing social order through fear and intimidation. Mexico's fragmented security and judicial systems significantly benefit CJNG operations. Federal and local law enforcement authorities really lack effective coordination and resources, making them susceptible to cartel bribery, intimidation, and infiltration. This systemic weakness enables CJNG to embed itself within local police forces and judicial processes, undermining effective state action. Some key examples of this could include the municipal elections in Michoacan, Jalisco, and Veracruz, which have all seen significant CJNG influence, with multiple instances of candidates financed or coerced directly by the cartel into compliance. Assassinations of other officials who resist cooperation occur regularly, and just as a clear example was the 2020 assassination attempt on the Mexican police chief. And this shows that CJNG is certainly willing to take the fight directly towards the Mexican government directly. Violent confrontations also happen with federal forces attempting extradition or the capture of cartel leadership, and this demonstrates CJNG's strategic use of violence as a form of political messaging. CJNG isn't just constrained to Mexico, however. They do operate within the United States and throughout Central America, albeit in a more low-level and clandestine capacity. In 2020, U.S. Border Patrol officer in California was arrested for allowing vehicles tied to CJNG to pass through inspection points in exchange for bribes. These cases rarely name CJNG explicitly, but often involve methamphetamine shipments, which is CJNG's primary export. In 2021, a former Texas police officer was convicted of helping CJNG leagued traffickers to evade arrest and move drugs and money. While CJNG does not appear to have the deep institutional penetration into the United States States like it does in Mexico, they do use bribery, intimidation, sleeper cells, all to facilitate the logistics, not to control politics. At the start of 2025, though, the U.S. designated CJNG along with several other Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. This opens the group up to all kinds of new pain as U.S. law enforcement, the military, and other agencies get all kinds of new funding and legal authorities to go after the group. And this all increases the levels of difficulty that CJNG will undergo to maintain its operations inside the U.S., and we'll just have to see just what impact it has on Mexico in the future. And we'll get more into this once we get to the economic section. CJNG's military capabilities significantly exceed typical criminal organizations, positioning them closer in relevance towards like a normal insurgent group. The cartel is heavily armed, tactically sophisticated, and possesses highly trained paramilitary units capable of direct confrontation with Mexican state forces and rival groups. CJNG maintains an extensive arsenal, far surpassing standard criminal groups. This includes weaponry like 50 caliber sniper rifles capable of penetrating armored vehicles, grenade launchers, assault rifles to include AK-47s and AR-15s, as well as machine guns, RPGs, and a wide variety of armored vehicles modified with thick steel and bulletproof glass. Additionally, they have managed to incorporate more advanced technology into their arsenal, notably drones adapted to carry and drop improvised explosive devices, as well as mortar rounds and hand grenades. This is very similar to the Sinaloa cartel, which we've discussed in a past video as well. CJNG is able to procure a lot of its small arms from the United States, where folks, mostly U.S. citizens of note, purchase those weapons and smuggle them south towards the cartel. Interesting to note is how CJNG has increasingly leveraged drones for surveillance, intelligence gathering, and even offensive operations, adopting tactics reminiscent of conflicts of Ukraine or the Middle East. They modify commercial drones to carry explosives, providing a very cost-effective and accurate means of targeting rivals or disrupting law enforcement operations without using direct confrontation. Reports indicate that some members of CJNG have actively studied and emulated tactics employed by groups like ISIS or other insurgent groups, particularly in drone deployment and asymmetric warfare. This is not to say that they've had any actual direct contact with those groups, but anybody with a Twitter account can watch those videos and learn some basic and immediate tactics on drone employment. CJNG operations reveal a high degree of tactical sophistication as well as careful planning. They routinely utilize ambushes, roadblocks, and coordinated assaults to overwhelm rivals and government forces. The cartel also conducts psychological operations, including publicly disseminating violent videos of their attacks designed to intimidate opponents and demoralize local populations and law enforcement. Something that we'll discuss more in the information domain, but this includes public displays of dismembered bodies as a warning. One specialized CJNG unit is known as Grupo Elite del CJNG, and this group demonstrates more exceptional discipline, training, and capabilities compared to what you may expect from the CJNG force. Members of this group reportedly receive paramilitary training, often from former military or police personnel. Their skill level is such that they can effectively engage Mexican armed forces in prolonged firefights and conduct organized assaults on fortified positions. CJNG frequently clashes with both government forces and rival cartels, marking their operational territory with notable violence. For example, from 2020 to 2021, numerous videos depict CJNG convoys openly displaying armored vehicles and RPGs in regions like Michoacan, demonstrating a willingness to openly challenge state forces. And these clashes have continued with the different factions of the Sinaloa cartel and other neighboring factions as well. There's also been recent discoveries of clandestine extermination camps inside of Mexico, where CJNG appears to have used ovens to dispose of large quantities of bodies over a long period of time. These pictures look pretty similar to anybody that's visited any of the concentration camps in Germany. In that sense, I mean piles of shoes and clothes right next to ovens. This is likely the method that they use to dispose of everything from prisoners to political opponents to rivals, traitors, and everything of the like. CJNG's military wing is directly overseen by its top leadership, but delegated operationally to key lieutenants. Of course, El Mencho maintains the ultimate authority over military operations and strategic planning. Juan Carlos Gonzalez, nicknamed LO3, and Ricardo Ruiz Velasco, nicknamed LRR, are key commanders involved in operational planning, coordination, logistics, and execution. Aldias Flores Silva, nicknamed El Jardinero, oversees operations specifically within the strategic state of Michoacan, directing major confrontations against rival groups like Carteles Unidos. CJNG's militarization and increasing tactical capabilities continue to pose severe challenges not just for this Mexican law enforcement, but also for the Mexican military. Their willingness and capacity to engage in direct combat with governmental forces, they're a more formidable insurgent-like group and not necessarily more of an organized crime group. Economically, CJNG operates as one of the most financially sophisticated and economically diverse criminal enterprises in the world. With annual revenues estimated to reach billions, its expansive network of diversified income streams underpin its significant influence and power. CJNG generates substantial revenue beyond just drug trafficking. Their income includes extensive operations in extortion, fuel theft, mining industry exploitation, and agricultural extortion, particularly within the lucrative avocado trade in Michoacan. The avocado industry alone has reported annual losses amounting to millions of dollars due to cartel-imposed taxes and extortion schemes. Similarly, illegal mining and fuel theft remain very profitable, further diversifying their income streams. While diversified, the cartel does primarily remain a drug cartel, with drug trafficking being their largest income stream. The cartel specializes in synthetic drugs, particularly methamphetamine and fentanyl, exported predominantly to the United States. According to the DEA, CJNG brings in billions annually, particularly from methamphetamine and fentanyl sales, positioning them as one of the largest synthetic drug traffickers in the world globally. Cocaine, sourced from South America, also significantly contributes to their income, transported via land and maritime routes to North America, Europe, and Asia. CJNG has strategically positioned itself in major logistical hubs throughout Mexico as well, most notably the port of Manzanillo in Colima, one of Latin America's busiest ports. Manzanillo serves as a crucial gateway for drug exports and precursor chemical imports from Asia. By controlling key port operations through corruption and coercion, CJNG effectively manages sophisticated international distribution networks, with the continuous movement of narcotics and money across global markets. CJNG extensively employs a complex money laundering scheme as well, funneling illicit profits through seemingly legitimate enterprises. Cartel-tied operations span multiple sectors, including real estate, agriculture, hospitality, and construction, with businesses both in Mexico and internationally, especially within the United States. Shell companies, often structured through intricate financial transactions and offshore accounts, further obfuscate the cartel's true economic footprint. And this is all similar in nature to how I described with the Sinaloa cartel in that video. CJNG's operations extend deeply within the United States, where financial investigations have uncovered numerous cartel-linked shell companies and front businesses. These operations involve real estate investments, used car dealerships, small retail businesses, and agricultural enterprises. This extensive financial presence allows CJNG to integrate illicit profits seamlessly into legal financial systems, cleaning money and getting it back to Mexico where it can freely use it. CJNG leverages sophisticated techniques to launder these funds, including using trade-based money laundering techniques involving inflated invoices and international trade manipulation. Real estate transactions also play a role, frequently in major US and Mexican cities, providing opportunities to cleanse significant amounts of funds discreetly. Utilization of cryptocurrency platforms also move funds rapidly and anonymously across borders. The economic influence of CJNG significantly destabilizes local economies. Regions experiencing cartel dominance face increased cost of living due to extortion-driven inflation, which is a crazy thing to say, diminished investments from legitimate enterprises fearing violence or corruption, and widespread disruption of local commerce. Additionally, the cartel's grip on agriculture negatively impacts international trade relations, particularly concerning Mexico's critical export commodities like, say, avocados. The DEA consistently highlights CJNG's immense profits from synthetic drugs trafficked into the United States. In summary, the DEA is very focused on highlighting CJNG's immense profits from synthetic drugs drugs trafficked into the United States and emphasizing fentanyl as having a very devastating societal impact. Michoacan's avocado industry is a critical economic driver, and that continues to suffer financially due to systematic CJNG extortion. And this can even lead to disruptions in international avocado exports. There have also been numerous financial investigations, including those by the U.S. Department of the Treasury, which have identified cartel-controlled enterprises operating as legitimate businesses across multiple U.S. states, leading to targeted sanctions and asset freezes against CJNG affiliates. Overall, CJNG is a highly profitable and sophisticated enterprise operating at both sides of the border and doing so in ways that are often very difficult to track and dismantle. The social influence of CJNG is both profound and multifaceted, shaping the lives of millions across Mexico. The cartel employs a combination of fear, community support, and cultural narratives to cement its authority and maintain control over local populations. CJNG actively promotes narco-culture, which is a glamorized portrayal of cartel life, to build an identity and foster loyalty among marginalized communities, particularly among youth. Using platforms like TikTok and YouTube, they broadcast extravagant lifestyles, wealth, and power, frequently accompanied by narco corridos, which is like folk songs that glorify cartel exploits. These portrayals attract younger demographics, normalizing cartel affiliation and creating aspirational narratives. In many regions where the state has limited or even an absent presence, CJNG can strategically fill a social support gap. For example, in areas that are more remote, the cartel can provide basic necessities like food, medical care, employment opportunities, and infrastructural investments. These acts can generate community support, or at the very least, a level of passive acceptance. In areas suffering chronic poverty and government neglect, CJNG's provisions create dependence and loyalty amongst the local population. Still, CJNG maintains authority primarily through intimidation, violence, and coercion. Communities under CJNG control frequently experience forced recruitment, public executions, mass kidnappings, and targeted killings, including attacks against journalists and activists who publicly oppose the cartel. The fear generated by these tactics ensures widespread compliance and silence. The violence perpetuated by CJNG and rival groups has directly contributed to a large displacement crisis within Mexico. As of 2023, over 300,000 individuals remain internally displaced within Mexico, with significant numbers of individuals fleeing CJNG-controlled territories due to escalating violence, extortion, and forced recruitment. Entire communities, particularly within Michoacan, Jalisco, Guanajuato, have been uprooted, resulting in severe social disruption and humanitarian crises. In terms of demographics here, CJNG recruits heavily from more vulnerable demographics, predominantly targeting males aged 15 to 35. Younger adolescents, some as young as 13 to 14, have often been forcibly recruited or enticed through the promises of financial stability, status, and security. Female participation within the cartel is certainly less prominent than that of males, but is nevertheless significant. Women often occupy roles related to logistics, finance, intelligence gathering. They're often used as what's called halcones, which is lookouts, or are less visual in their operational roles. Violent attacks against journalists, such as the assassination of the prominent reporter Regina Martinez in Veracruz, illustrates CJNG's systemic silencing of free speech and freedom of the press. Regular discoveries of mass graves and the aforementioned secret extermination camps, notably in Guanajuato and Jalisco, highlight the grim consequences of cartel violence in these populations. Social media platforms remain quite saturated with narco culture content that attracts hundreds of thousands of views, significantly influencing public perception, particularly among the more impressionable youth demographics. Overall, CJNG has a profound societal impact, demonstrated through its dual strategies of both fear and support, significantly complicating efforts by the Mexican central government to combat the cartel authority. The cartel's systemic exploitation of vulnerable demographics and its sophisticated integration into community life represent enduring social challenges that both Mexico and the US will not really be able to resolve themselves. It's important for Americans watching this video that are learning about this situation to know that this is a Mexican challenge that Mexico and Mexicans themselves will have to resolve. This is not something that the United States can unilaterally enforce a fix. This can be alleviated by greater US involvement, but it can also be exacerbated in the same way. It really just depends on what the US does and how it chooses to go about this problem. CJNG strategically uses information warfare to amplify its influence, project power, and manipulate perceptions across various platforms. This is certainly one of their more sophisticated traits. Their complex propaganda, targeted cyber operations, and aggressive media control shapes public narratives, recruits new members, and undermines the government's authority. CJNG invests heavily into propaganda operations, leveraging social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok to disseminate videos and imagery showcasing their military strength, loyalty to their leader, El Mencho, and acts of violence against rivals. These videos often feature shows of strength. There's one video that shows the heavily armed convoy, as well as other videos showing them patrolling towns in broad daylight. And these videos are clearly designed to intimidate rivals, the public, and law enforcement. This tactic reinforces the cartel's image as omnipresent and unstoppable. Narco messages, known locally as narco-mantas, are regularly displayed in highly visible public areas, containing direct threats to rivals, corrupt officials, or disloyal associates. These messages further amplify CJNG's narrative dominance, extending psychological control through direct and public intimidation. CJNG has systemically infiltrated or silenced local media outlets within its territories as well, particularly in states like Jalisco, Michoacan, Veracruz, and Guanajuato. The cartel employs threats, violence, and financial incentives to control local news coverage, leading to regional news blackouts or significantly sanitized reporting following violent incidents that happen to involve CJNG. Attacks on journalists and media institutions further enforce their narrative control, severely limiting access and independent reporting in occupied areas. CJNG increasingly employs digital platforms for operational purposes as well, including recruitment, coordination of activities, and internal communication. They leverage encrypted communication platforms like WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal. Overall, CJNG is no slouch in the information domain, and that's a huge challenge for Mexico, especially in areas where they don't have the same level of physical presence as they do in other areas. And this is a vacuum that CJNG has very clearly filled. CJNG exercises strategic control over critical infrastructure assets, allowing the cartel to sustain and expand its expansive criminal operations. By dominating crucial ports, transportation routes, and production zones and communication networks, CJNG maintains a robust logistical foundation that supports its international trafficking and distribution network. CJNG systemically targets and controls strategic infrastructure points critical to drug trafficking and their illegal operations. These include major transportation hubs like ports, highways, border crossings, and remote rural areas that are ideal for drug production and storage. Notably, the port of Manzio and Colima is heavily influenced by CJNG through pervasive corruption involving customs officials and port personnel. The control also facilitates drug trafficking, chemical precursor imports from Asia, and money laundering operations through container manipulation and fraudulent shipping activities. Highways and border crossings, particularly those along Mexico's northern border with the United States, are also significantly under heavy CJNG influence. The cartel exploits these routes for rapid transportation of narcotics and other kinds of contraband, leveraging bribery and intimidation of local law enforcement to ensure minimal interference. CJNG maintains a fully integrated supply chain from the initial importation of precursor chemicals sourced primarily again from Asia through clandestine production facilities within Mexico to the final distribution networks across the United States and other international markets. As examples, the cartel reportedly operates hundreds of hidden drug laboratories, particularly methamphetamine production sites in states like Michoacan, Jalisco, and Guanajuato. These clandestine labs often leverage remote terrain to avoid detection, and this supports large-scale narcotic production and distribution capabilities. And that, by and large, is our analysis of CJNG. Again, this is one of Mexico's most dangerous and sophisticated drug cartels. While the Sinaloa cartel, which has been Mexico's largest drug cartel, is basically imploding from a civil war, CJNG has managed to take control of large amounts of Sinaloa area and is taking advantage of the chaos to grow. And because of this, they could eventually take Sinaloa's place at the top of the mountain. But all of this this depends on the growing threat of what exactly the United States does about any of this. The FTO designation has led to increased levels of surveillance activity. However, we haven't seen anything crazy like U.S. troops operating inside of Mexico yet. We're seeing U.S. troops training with the Mexican military more, and that might embolden Mexico to go harder against the cartels. It's always a question, though, of how hard they choose to go and against who specifically. Sinaloa is vulnerable and CJNG is a rising star. Mexico can't allow CJNG to get too big, but it can't let Sinaloa recover. Both, however, will be hard for Mexico to take on by themselves, and ultimately will require a sustained multi-decade effort to wrap up. In the end of the day, it'll be an interesting question to see whether CJNG remains as dangerous as they are today, or if they're able to evolve like other cartels before them to remain relevant, depending on what the United States and Mexico choose to do. These stunning acts of violence and cruelty, however, are not really good strategies if you're wanting to stay into this whole thing for the long haul. An example, why I say this as an example, ISIS implemented levels of brutality and audacity that really clashed with Al-Qaeda leadership, even whenever ISIS was part of Al-Qaeda. And this all played into why ISIS got absolutely pummeled by everybody so quickly after they split off from Al-Qaeda, while Al-Qaeda remains basically as they were before. CJNG bears more resemblance to ISIS in terms of relative violence and brutality to their peers. The only question now is if they get the same level of attention to clean it all up. That being said, this has been a very long video and there's a lot of information here, so leave a like if you found this to be helpful or informative. Comment your thoughts down below on what you think will happen to CJNG in the near future. Share this video with a friend if you found it interesting, you think that they will as well, and subscribe for more analysis just like this and later videos. Till then, I'll see you all next time. Later.